Tefal, for years a symbol of durability, now brings you Tefal Tradition. Even more slippery, its new honeycomb interior finish protects the coating against utensil scratches, so you get the longest-lasting non-stick performance ever offered by Tefal. Extra thick Tradition stands up to heat distortion.
He spent years soaring through the skies, trusted with the lives of hundreds, guiding aircrafts through storms. Cool, calm, collected, a man of precision. But in November 2017, that same man, in control of so many people's lives, would commit a murder so savage, so personal, that even seasoned detectives would struggle to make sense of it. This is the story of Andrew McIntosh, a well-heeled airline pilot with a 100k salary, a countryside home, a job others could only dream of, and how he traded all of it for a saucepan, a bottle of wine, and a brutal act of violence that would end a woman's life and ruin his own. Woolscott, Warwickshire. A tiny tranquil village hidden among the green stretches of the English Midlands. It's the kind of place that makes you whisper when you visit, like you'd wake somebody up if you spoke too loud. That's where Andrew McIntosh lived. In quiet countryside comfort, a world away from airports and long-haul flights. Signed off work for a spell, but still on the books with TUI, one of the UK's biggest airlines. He was on standby duty, still trusted to fly, still earning over 6 figures a year. No shortage of money, no shortage of options. But underneath that uniform, the polished image, things weren't so steady. Andrew had married Patricia McIntosh back in 2012. She was a nail technician, warm and popular in the local community. People liked her. She was kind, grounded. But the relationship had cracks early on. Behind closed doors, Andrew could be controlling, moody, difficult. The house, a pretty £300,000 bungalow, became a battlefield. They wanted to sell the house and move their separate ways. Patricia didn't want to lower the asking price. Andrew did. And for months, the tension simmered, boiled, until one night it spilled over. November the 15th, 2017. A cold Wednesday evening. McIntosh had been drinking. No one knows exactly how much, but it was enough to loosen restraint, to fog his mind just enough. And instead of staying home, instead of cooling off, he got in his car and drove across the countryside. Not to talk, not to reason. He had something darker in mind. He pulled up outside the bungalow, the home they once shared. Now just a legal footnote in their split. Inside, Trish was cooking. There were peas boiling on the stove. A normal evening. A woman living her life. What happened next lasted only moments, but it was brutal. They argued again over the house. Same fight, different day. But this time, Andrew didn't just lose his temper, he lost control. He reached for the nearest object, a saucepan full of water and peas, and smashed her with it. Again and again. She fell, but he didn't stop. He kicked her while she was down, again and again, until the kitchen was soaked in blood, until her face was shattered, until the screams stopped. She was left lying in the corner of her own kitchen, dying slowly on the cold, tiled floor. And what did Andrew do? He didn't call for help. He didn't try CPR. He pulled the blinds down, turned off a beeping appliance, and walked out of the house like he's just had another argument. Then he went to the pub. Seriously, sat down, drank a bottle of wine, and began texting confessions to his friends. Not to save her, not to explain. I've just done the unthinkable. I'm f***ed. And later, I've just murdered Trish in rage, and I'm waiting for the police. I love you both. Please forgive me. At 9:45 p.m, about half an hour after the killing, police pulled him over 18 miles away in Rugby. He didn't resist, didn't protest. Back in Nightcoat, police stepped into a scene of horror. Blood everywhere, a saucepan on the floor, and Patricia McIntosh lifeless in the corner of her kitchen. But what made a man with everything, money, career, respect, beat his wife to death over a house? And was it really a moment of madness or a calculated act of rage? The courtroom was silent when the prosecution laid it all out. At Warwick Crown Court, the prosecution was led by Peter Greaves-Smith, a man who didn't need to dramatise what had happened. The facts were horrifying enough on their own. The defendant picked up a saucepan from the cooker, full of water and peas, and smashed her in the head with it. Then, once she was down, he used his feet. And it didn't end there. The police weren't just relying on forensics. They had the text messages Andrew sent in Andrew's own words. But Andrew McIntosh wasn't pleading guilty. He claimed manslaughter, not murder, arguing that his mental state at the time was impaired, that he was under extreme emotional distress, maybe even suffering from a breakdown. I just remember having an overwhelming feeling of emotion. I wasn't thinking straight. I don't know what the trigger was, said Andrew. But the prosecution wasn't buying it, and neither was the jury. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Alexander Kolar, gave the kind of evidence that chills even seasoned court reporters. There were 34 external injuries. Her nose was fractured. There was tearing inside the lips, bruising on the scalp, and blood in her air pipe. She had swallowed it while she was still alive. There was some bleeding behind the brain, but the overall trauma suggested one terrifying thing. She died quickly, but not instantly. Long enough to feel it, long enough to panic, long enough to know it was Andrew who was doing it. In court, Patricia's family didn't hold back. They were devastated, not just by the murder, but by the trial, by the fact that Andrew refused to plead guilty, forced them to relive it all. We still don't understand how or why this happened. He had the choice to do the right thing and plead guilty. He's shown no remorse. No sentence is long enough, and no sentence will bring her back, said Patricia's family. After 7 days of trial and just 3 hours of jury deliberation, the verdict was clear. Guilty of murder. No diminished responsibility, no mental breakdown, just rage. Andrew McIntosh was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 17 years to serve before he can apply for parole. Friends of Trish described Andrew as controlling, moody and difficult. But like so many abusers, Andrew hid it in plain sight. At the end of the day, he was a pilot. He had a job that screamed trustworthy, and he knew how to manipulate perception. In the months leading up to the murder, Andrew had been signed off work for stress. But just 2 months before killing Trish, he was declared fit to fly again, and that, for me, is terrifying. Could this have been prevented? We always ask this after tragedies. Could someone have stopped it? The truth? Perhaps. If someone had listened to Trish, if past behaviour had been reported or documented, if mental health assessments for high-pressure jobs like pilots were more rigorous, if society took controlling behaviour seriously before it turns to murder. Trish McIntosh died alone, in her kitchen, at the hands of the man who once promised to love her. Her family will never get her back. And Andrew McIntosh, the airline pilot with the perfect image, will spend the rest of his days haunted by what he did, behind bars, grounded permanently. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.